Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Nessie's Dead. As always, we are your hosts, Spencer and Helen.
Hello.
Hello. So, I'm excited because you're hosting. I get a break tonight.
I am hosting, and I thought since you kept coming for my true crime crown, I would change things up a little bit and do something that's a little bit more your type of topic.
Okay, so I'm passing off my crown, mystical, funky,
Yes.
conspiracy kind of crown off to you tonight.
Yes, I thought I'd try something new. So tonight I thought I would cover some North American cryptids for you.
My favorite, my absolute favorite. Okay, let's go.
All right, so I have a couple here. I have two or three which you're probably pretty familiar with, but I'm hoping that the last one might be fairly new for you.
Well, it's funny because when I do a true crime case, I'm like, oh, she knows it. She knows this one. And I'm always trying to find something you don't know if I'm doing true crime. And I feel like maybe you feel the same, trying to find something cryptid for me because that's my wheelhouse.
Yes. Shall we take the plunge?
Yes, please.
All right, so we are going to start off in the pine lands of southern New Jersey. There lays a creature that has terrorized the area for centuries. What we know today as the Jersey Devil.
Love him. I love him.
And prior to being known as the Jersey Devil, he was also known as the Leeds Devil or the Devil of Leeds.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so this would have come from either the family he came from or it's also Leeds Point in South Jersey. So either one of those topics could have been where the name came from. The Jersey Devil has many variations, but it usually is described as having either a goat or horse head, leathery bat wings, and hind legs that resemble a kangaroo with hooves, and small arms that are clawed, is reported to be able to move quite quickly and makes a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream.
Any kind of creature that is partially a goat. Like, give me a goat-headed beast. That's my favorite.
Well, good. We're going to cover it. Now, there are a lot of contradicting tales to the origin of the Jersey Devil, but according to popular folklore, the Jersey Devil originated in 1735 with the family of Japhet Leeds from Leeds Point, which is now Atlantic County, New Jersey. It was that year that Mother Deborah Leeds discovered she was pregnant. She had already had 12 children, so she cursed the 13th child, saying he would be the devil himself. Months later, on a dark and stormy night, a baby boy was born. Now, the baby boy was born normal. However, gradually the child began to change, turning into a hideous creature and transforming into a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and a forked tail.
Wow, it's like the movie The 13th Year, but demon version.
Yeah. Eventually, the creature attacked the family, screaming and growling and beating everyone with his tail, before it went up in the chimney and flew away into the forest, where it is said to remain to this day. Now, in some tales, the mother was supposedly a witch, and the father was the devil himself. Other versions do state that a local clergyman had come and attempted to do an exorcism on the creature. Those are just some variations. I think the main story is it flew up the chimney. I like that one best.
Yeah, I like the image of it, like,
Yeah.
racing around, and then all of a sudden it just zips on over, and up the chimney it goes like some perverted Santa.
Exactly.
Like a reverse evil Santa. I love that.
Yes. Now, by the late 1700s, the legend of the devil continued growing. In 1820, Joseph Bonaparte, who was actually the brother of Napoleon, like the Napoleon, had claimed to see it while he was hunting. During this time, there were also mysterious livestock deaths, and in the 1900s, the Jersey Devil encounters were blowing up, leading to schools closing and hunters even searching for the devil.
It led to closing schools
Yes, it did.
in the early 1900s.
It sure did.
That is so cool. You
I
know,
know.
that beats a snow day. Oh, there's some kind of demonic creature racing around the woods. Stay home, kids.
Exactly.
All I got was swine flu and snow days.
Exactly. During 1909, there were nearly 1,000 reports that came in from eyewitnesses throughout southern Jersey. Some tracks were even found in fields, but bloodhounds refused to follow these tracks, so there was
Mm,
never any lead to where they went.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Now, Navy Commander Stephen Decatur reported seeing the creature while he was doing a cannon testing in the Pine Barrens. He said that he shot at the creature and reported that he had blown a hole in the devil, but it was unfazed by the cannon and flew back into the woods.
Wow. It's always, and I feel like this is a part of why you brought this particular person in as a witness. It's always really interesting, and I feel it brings a sense of credibility whenever it's somebody who's like a Navy general or even a police officer who's like, oh, yeah, I saw this monster.
Yeah, same, exactly. Because why would they make that up? They kind of have a higher reputation to uphold
Yeah.
than going around saying tales of Jersey Devils.
Yeah. I would
Now,
assume anyway.
exactly. Now, for a while, the craze about the Jersey Devil did fade away until 1927, when a taxi driver in Salem City allegedly encountered the creature while changing a tire. He reported to the police that the creature was pounding and flying over the roof of his cab. In 1960, several residents in Mays Landing heard horrific screams throughout the night. The unexplained noises caused panic for the people, and police hung flyers assuring residents that the Jersey Devil was nothing more than a hoax. So, I mean, residents are hearing screaming throughout the night. I feel like it's a pretty big deal when the police have to hang up flyers to calm everybody down. Like, it's nothing, guys.
Yeah. Wow.
Now,
But there were no sightings in relation to the screams.
no,
Oh.
not that I found. Now, there was also even a reward put out by a very wealthy merchant for the capture of the creature, dead or alive, reaching up to $250,000. And a circus owner also offered a $100,000 reward for anyone who could capture the creature alive. But as you know, however, none of these rewards were ever claimed.
No.
No. In 1972, Mary Christensen reportedly saw the devil on Green Tree Road. She claimed she saw a towering figure taller than the average man with thick legs like a goat and a huge woolly head crossing the road about 25 feet behind her. So another sighting was also in 1980. The Jersey Devil makes its name amongst the people again when a forest ranger of the Wharton State Forest, Chief Ranger, in fact, Alan McFarland, saw something that was gross and completely baffled his animal knowledge. What he reportedly saw that day was a brutal scene on a South Jersey farm where a pack of pig were killed. Their backs and their heads had been eaten, and their bodies were scratched and torn, but there were no tracks surrounding their bodies and no blood on the ground.
Oh, that's like the cattle mutilation. I
Yeah.
mean, not the same method because the cattle mutilations are usually like they're sucked dry with no evidence instead of the parts of them being eaten. You said the top of their head and back.
Yeah, had been eaten and they were scratched and torn.
That is really odd.
I know that reminded me of the cattle mutilations as well because there was no blood on the ground. But then in 1988, another report was made by a press reporter who claims to see the creature 7 years prior and described the beast in grave detail down to the size of its large teeth. So it seems like at this point, the Jersey Devil, it's year after year after year after year after year. Sightings just don't seem to cease. And if we're looking back from like the 1700s, this is a pretty long time by now.
It is, especially considering the fact that it's into a more modern era, like right now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, 1988 is not right now, sadly, but I feel like that definitely adds a hint of believability to it.
Yeah. And we have more.
Oh,
Yeah. After this, another sighting was reported as a group of dirt bikers went camping and riding into the Pine Barrens. They reported that their bikes just stalled when riding down the trail. Once the bikes quit running, the men heard a piercing, inhuman scream coming from the woods. When they returned back to camp that night, they continued to hear the screams throughout the night. I would have left.
yeah, I don't anything out like that in the woods. Like I always say, no,
Mm,
that's
no.
no, get me out of them woods.
Now, the sightings continue into the 1990s with encounters reported from Forest Ranger John Irwin, so another forest ranger,
Oh,
who saw the creature blocking a road ahead of him on his drive home. He stated it was 6 feet tall, had horns, and matted black fur. The creature stood there for several minutes before turning and running into the forest.
this is the second witness seeing it. The Jersey Devil crossing the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of more being seen in the woods, desolate kind of areas. But then we do have the next sighting here. A shop owner of the Smithville Inn also reported seeing the creature that same year. While she was taking out the trash, she claimed that she saw the shadow of the beast with its wings expanded flying over her.
What year was that again?
1990s. It didn't give a specific year in the 90s, just the 90s. Now, this one to me, I like this one because you've got 3 cars, so these people don't know each other. On Route 9 to Bayville, 3 cars were forced to slam on their brakes when a 10-foot tall creature with a long head and short, flat ears runs across the road. One witness says the creature emerged from the wooden area near a mini mall before disappearing into the woods on the other side of the road. What gets me about that is some of these sightings that are within the town or here and there, you got to think at one point this was all forest. It was all woods. It's kind of like when you start a new development and stuff and you start seeing bobcats or coyotes in your neighborhood. They were there first. So it doesn't surprise me that they would have seen this creature coming from an area such as a mini mall and going into the woods on the other side of the road.
Yeah, the Jersey Devil's like, what the hell is this mini mall doing?
Right? Exactly. Now, most recently, sighting would be in October of 2015.
Oh.
Yeah, so this occurred in Galloway Township. David Black stated that he was driving along Route 9 near a golf course when what he thought was a llama at first walked out from, I know a llama,
You wish.
at first walked out from the wooded area. Suddenly, though, the creature spreads its wings and flew away. He captured this on his cell phone and the photo went viral. Only a couple days later, Emily Martin shot a video of what appeared to be the same creature spotted in an old Port Republican road, which is near Leeds Point from the origin spot.
Oh, yeah.
Both witnesses do claim that their footage is authentic and not photoshopped. Even though, with all the amount of eyewitnesses, like I said, that's a lot of stories for one cryptid over the years. However, people still tend to believe that the sightings are brought from hoaxes, misidentifications due to the rumors of the legend. Some even claim it could be misidentification of cranes.
The bird?
The bird.
I'm pretty sure I know what a crane looks like, and I don't confuse it with a winged goat.
What do you think about the Jersey Devil?
I don't think it's a crane. I certainly don't think that. That's like in our Flatwoods Monster episode.
Yeah.
One of the theories was that people were like, oh, it was a big barn owl.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are plenty of cases of misidentification with it. However, I've never really believed in the Jersey Devil.
Really?
But I can't help but kind of think that there is something out there in this New Jersey area that maybe is it maybe like a Sasquatch kind of creature.
With wings?
I like a winged Bigfoot,
A winged Bigfoot?
big wing.
Big
Um,
wing. The big wing.
that's better actually. I feel like maybe it was like some kind of strange creature that was in the area, or maybe it is some type of cryptid that really actually out there, but I don't think that it is demonic. I don't think it has any kind of superpowers, and I don't believe in the origin stories of it.
So do you think the brother was just making it all up in the origin
Yeah.
story?
Or maybe people started seeing this type of scary creature at that time in New Jersey and they just came up with this origin story for it.
Perhaps that does sound like it could be. Well, I would say it's kind of that thing as well, like with the Loch Ness Monster. If you're talking about a creature that's been seen from the 1820s, how long can it live?
That's one thing that I'm like, ugh. But maybe the Jersey Devil is like the way that I interpret Sasquatch theories is that it's interdimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this Jersey Devil creature knows of a certain portal that is accessible through the Jersey woods. And that's why people see it. And then that's why it kind of comes and goes so easily.
That would make sense because I don't see a creature living quite that long.
No.
Wow.
Skeptics are listening to us and we're like, the portal theory makes sense.
Exactly. Now, speaking of old cryptids, the next cryptid we're going to cover, whose name means the evil spirit that devours mankind, the Wendigo.
I love a Wendigo.
Now, the Wendigo's a tricky one. So, while there have been many reported sightings over the years of Wendigo, most of them have been secondhand accounts. And there seem to be stories that are passed down through generations. Not a whole lot of people are reporting seeing Wendigos as much as you would hear about the Jersey Devil. I was really trying to dig and find some news stories about the Wendigo or a new encounter, but the ones that I kind of fell into seemed like they could have been fictional or made for a short YouTube video, or it just didn't go very well. So I left those encounters out and just kind of kept it to the evidence that I did find across several sources. So, with that being said, legend has it that the Wendigo was a lost hunter that was facing starvation during a brutal cold winter. His intense hunger drove him to the most taboo of all taboos, cannibalism.
I thought you were going to say eating at Arby's.
Almost. It's that second. Cannibalism is first.
Cannibalism is pretty bad.
Yeah. Shortly after feasting on human flesh, the man transformed into a beast-like creature, designated to roam the frozen forest of Canada and Minnesota in search of people to eat, never
Oh,
to be satisfied.
I didn't know that the origin of it is up there. I'm from Minnesota, so that's really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Just a bunch of Wendigos.
A whole bunch of Wendigos up there. Now, the Wendigo was first described by the ancient Algonquin tribes in 1535 in eastern Canada. In this area, winter is very difficult and was even more so for people who lived before modern industrialization. Surviving the winters caused a lot of people to do whatever they could to survive, including eating whatever they could. It was in this such time that the Wendigo hunted most vigorously. Each Algonquin tribe describes the creature as a little bit different when it comes to the way it looks. Tales differ, but all describe him as greedy, selfish, and a cannibal. Now, some tales state that he looks like a decayed humanoid whose innards can be seen due to the decay. This
Ew.
most likely came from European influence. Today, it's described as a very bony, skinny skeleton covered with stretched skin, lips that appear to be chewed off, long claws, large glowing eyes, a heart made of ice, and extremely large. That is also cursed with extreme hunger. So, when the indigo does consume something, it grows to the size of its meal. This leaves it unable to grow full. It wanders, unable to be satisfied, ever feeling full, and always hungering for human flesh. Now, wendigos are described as notoriously hard to kill. There are many theories to their weakness as far as weapons are concerned. Some say that only iron, steel, and silver can kill them. Some tales say it is vulnerable to such things as fire and silver. Others say it can be killed with firearms. And others say only by removing its frozen heart and casting it into the flames can it be killed.
That's the theory I know of, is that they
Mhm.
can't be killed unless you do it to the heart.
Yeah. Now, the most gruesome method, though, of killing is to shatter the creature's heart with a silver stake and then dismember the body with a silver axe. It is also believed that people become wendigos by becoming greedy or participating in cannibalism due to starvation and giving into the temptations caused by the harsh winters that they are enduring. It is also described as a spirit which causes sufferable individuals to become cannibals, or greedy people who put groups of people in harm due to their greed or boasting of wealth can also become wendigos. There's also such a thing as wendigo psychosis, which is the craving of human flesh.
That's what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. One of the most famous stories of a wendigo sighting was in the early 1900s when Cree chief Jack Fiddler claimed to have killed 14 wendigos in his lifetime. Jack followed in his father's footsteps. He became a famous shaman for his alleged abilities to conjure animals and protect people from spirits. But most importantly, the people believed that he could successfully defeat wendigos. Apparently, some were sent against his people by enemy shamans, and others were members of his own tribe who had been taken by the curse due to their greed. In some cases, Jack was even asked by family members to kill very sick loved ones before they turned into wendigos, and sometimes a person would ask Jack themselves to be euthanized by necessary rituals.
Like, out of fear that they would become one?
Yeah.
I wonder why people would think they were becoming a wendigo. Like, unless they were like, oh, I just ate a bunch of people.
True. I mean, this is also a tribe in the 1900s, so I guess the fear of it in these harsh winters, and maybe they did eat some people. Who knows? However, he did believe that he was doing right by killing these, quote, wendigos. In October of 1907, Fiddler and his son Joseph were tried for murder of a Cree woman. Jack and his brother were told this woman was said to be a wendigo and were told to kill this woman. So they choked her to death with a piece of string. Both men, of course, pled guilty. They thought they were doing what was necessary and that she had been possessed by the spirit of a wendigo. Fiddler claimed that the woman was on the verge of transforming entirely into this wendigo and that she had to be killed before she murdered other members of the Cree tribe. He was ultimately imprisoned for murder at the age of 87, despite what Fiddler considered allegedly was a success for their cause.
And he went about it using string? That's an odd way to kill anything.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, no one should kill anyone, but I've never heard of string being a method.
Mm-mm.
That sounds like a really hard, painful way to go.
Well, maybe, I don't know, because he didn't say rope. He said string. Yeah, that doesn't sound fun.
No.
Now, another famous story of a Wendigo encounter involved another Cree Indian named Swift Runner. As the story goes, Swift Runner murdered and ate his whole family during the winter of 1879. During those winters of 1878 and 79, this was a time of starvation and misery had totally come across the Cree people. He became possessed by the Wendigo psychosis, which actually the definition of that Wendigo psychosis is characterized by grand delusions and cannibalistic impulses that anthropologists have identified in several Canadian Indian cultures. That being said, he murdered his wife and family and cooked and ate their flesh. Eventually, he was arrested, brought to trial, and in December of 1879, even to his own death, Runner claimed to be possessed by a Wendigo, and at the time of the murders, nevertheless, he was hanged for his crimes in December of 1879. Now, today, it's most certainly what will be called a myth, a legend, even folklore. But while many myths and legends often fade with each generation's passing, the Wendigo still captures many people's attentions. Over the years, as we've seen, it's been a symbol of terror, popularized in books, movies, televisions, and shows. For me, I kind of think the Wendigo is not so much a legend, but a cautionary creature of you don't eat people when we're starving to death in the winter.
I agree.
Yeah, because what I saw from these winters, they were very hard to survive. So it wouldn't be strange for somebody to start looking at their neighbor out of starvation or even to start eating themselves in order to survive. So I think the Wendigo came as a tell of if you eat people, you'll turn into this horrific creature that can never be satisfied and you'll always crave human flesh. For this cryptid, I do think this one's a myth.
I do too. It
Yeah.
reminds me of the Rougarou. It
Yeah,
reminds me of the Rougarou because it seems very like a superstition, a way to keep children being obedient, and I mean, in this case, keep people from eating each other. And then did the lore just kind of manifest into a cryptid?
and it's one of those you don't really get new sightings, encounters. It's these
Yeah, that's
stories that have been passed down generations and generations. And also, the main stories we have were the shaman. And we're looking at the late 1800s. I do think it was just a cautionary tale not to eat your neighbor.
yeah, but they sound fun.
Do they?
Like the life of a party.
Oh, I don't know. Well, that's the Wendigo.
The Wendigo. So for us, it might be a win to know.
A Wendigo. It's a
Mhm.
no-go Wendigo.
Sorry, Wendy.
Sorry. All right, should we move on to the next one?
Yes.
All right. So, in November of 1966, November 12th to be exact, the citizens in a small town in West Virginia were stalked by an unknown creature with large, glowing red eyes,
Mm,
thus beginning the legend of the Mothman.
I knew it. I didn't know it when you said November. I was like, November? I don't know. November is cryptid month. Like that is cryptid core month
Yeah.
completely. So perfect month to come out for Mothman. But when you said West Virginia, I was like, Mothman. Mothman!
Now, I know the Mothman isn't your favorite.
No.
All right.
Everyone loves Mothman.
I love Mothman. So let's see if I can maybe change your thoughts on the Mothman a little bit. Let's see. Let's dive in and see.
Let's see.
So, Point Pleasant, West Virginia has a population of about 4,000 people. It is a city surrounded by countryside and is bisected by the Ohio River. It is a town described as peaceful and pleasant, thus its name. But on this day in 1966, it becomes home to an unsettling creature that still strikes fear for many. It was during this time that reports began to surface of a creature stalking residents, with accounts being so frightening that one person suffered from psychological trauma for years after this encounter.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Now, the first sighting occurred on November 12th, 1966, like we said, when 5 men digging a grave claimed to see a winged man fly above them and into the tree line that they could not explain.
While digging a grave?
They were grave diggers, so they were out at the cemetery digging a grave.
Legally.
Legally, yes, legally.
Yeah. Usually the fear with that is not some kind of bug-like humanoid cryptid flying over you.
Exactly. It's more like, did we see a ghost or a demon or an angel? But yeah, so 2 nights later, a contractor 90 miles from Point Pleasant was watching TV when the television began glitching out. He had then heard some screeching noises outside his house, so he decided to venture out with his German Shepherd Bandit to check out the scene when he spotted a figure with his flashlight. Two glowing eyes reflected back at him like bicycle reflectors, hovering over a field, and upon further inspection, he realized these were eyes which belonged to a tall, dark figure standing on a branch of a tree that then flew away screeching while its eyes still reflected. His dog then began going crazy, of course, at the sight of this creature. The dog did run after it and unfortunately was never seen again.
Oh, what?
Yeah, Bandit didn't make it out of that one.
Wow.
Yeah. 3 days later in Point Pleasant, two couples, Mr. and Mrs. Roger Scarberry and Mrs. and Mr. Steve Millette, were driving back from a double date when they observed something strange. A pair of glowing red eyes. They claimed to see a hideous man-sized, perhaps 7 feet tall, winged creature. The creature was in the road with what appeared to be a dog carcass. As they
Like
pass,
it was like eating it?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It might have been Bandit.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
that.
It was 3 days later. They pass this creature. It then takes flight and chases them. They did claim they were going at speeds of over 100 miles per hour. As they're driving at these high speeds, this creature is just screeching a high-pitched sound and is right on their tail end. But when they finally reach town, the creature left. Like it just said zoop. Of course, once they did reach town, they rushed into the police department and reported their account. After this occurred, a press conference was had. This would have been on the 16th, where the Scarberry and Millette couples gave their accounts from the previous evening. At this conference was Dr. Robert Smith, a wildlife expert, and he claimed at the conference that the couple had just seen an abnormally large crane. The sandhill crane, to
A
be
crane
exact.
again.
Mm-hmm.
What's
Yes.
with all these cryptids? Everyone's like, oh, that's a bird.
This crane, though, however, it is common in North America, but the eyes on the crane do not glow. They
No.
do, however, have shocks of bright red feathers around their eyes. They
Oh.
usually can grow to about 4 feet tall, but if it was 7 feet tall, that would be extremely abnormal.
That'd be a scary crane.
Yeah. And also at this time, bird watchers in the area did not recall spotting this bird. Those bird watchers.
Here to save the day.
They were like, here.
They were like, listen up.
These reports, of course, hit the paper, and word of the encounter spread throughout the town. There are, however, some theories that were inconsistent made between how the story was reported to the police and what was later in the press. So one source says that the creature did not fly after the car, but rather shuffled down the road after them for a short distance.
Shuffled?
But the
Okay.
couple does claim that they were driving at speeds of over 100 and this creature was not letting off of them. Now, on the evening of the 16th, around the same time as the local papers hit mailboxes, Mr. and Mrs. Raymond, along with Marcella Bennett and her baby, Tina, were on their way to visit their friend Thomas, who just lived on the outskirts of town. As they pulled up to Thomas's property and got out of their vehicle, they were met by a large gray figure, bigger than a man, with large glowing red eyes, who rose up from the ground nearby. It seemed that maybe they had disturbed the creature when they pulled up in their vehicle.
Oh, like he
No.
was sleeping?
Yeah, or crouched down or something. Marcella was so shocked by what she was witnessing, she forgot she was carrying the baby and dropped her in
Oh my
panic.
God.
Realizing what she has done, of course, she picks up the baby and makes a panicked dash for the Thomas house with Mr. and Mrs. Raymond. They were let in by the children. The creature chased after them and terrorized them by peering into the windows.
Oh, so he made it personal. You woke me up from a nap, and I'm gonna beam my glowing eyes into your window all night.
Exactly. Now, the police were called and they arrived about an hour and a half later. The creature, of course, by that time had vanished.
Mm-hmm.
But this would not be the last time Marcella would see the Mothman.
Oh, she
Now,
sees it again.
yeah. So Marcella, she also lived on the outskirts of Point Pleasant near the TNT area close to Thomas. She claimed that after her initial encounter with the creature would visit her home several different times, stalking her, and she would often hear a blood-curdling scream at night.
Why is it stalking her?
I don't know. She is the one who dropped the baby. Maybe she made a big, huge hoopla when she first saw it. Maybe the creature was like, "You're the one who woke me up."
He's just super petty.
But because of these encounters that she had, many years later, it was still reported that she suffered from nightmares and had mental issues that were caused from these said encounters with the Mothman. Also, to make a note, that area that I mentioned, the TNT area, where her and Thomas had lived close to, that TNT area of Point Pleasant is pretty much like a large area. It was dotted with small concrete igloos. So these were used to store ammunition during World War II, but this became a hotspot for Mothman. The area is also adjacent to a 2,500-acre wildlife station, which is covered with dense forests, steep hills, and is also filled with many tunnels. So this is kind of giving
A
you a little area
station?
here, huh?
What do you mean a station?
That's what it's called. The McClintock Wildlife Station is what it's actually called, the place. So
Okay,
it's
like
like
a
a
preserve.
wildlife forest.
Okay. And what are these tunnels connecting to
I
exactly?
don't know. It just says that the place is filled with many tunnels. I'm guessing like cave systems. That's what my best guess is by many
Hmm.
tunnels.
I wonder, is this considered a national park?
It's a management area.
So weird that that is where Mothman typically was hanging out. I wonder if they're like something government cover up there.
Well, here it says it's known for aliens and hauntings.
Oh, it's like Skinwalker Ranch.
It's known for,
It's like it seems like it's a sanctuary, a refuge, wildlife refuge. It just kind of seems like a nature preserve.
well, if it is like a nature preserve or something like that, it seems like the perfect little spot for our Mothman to hide.
Yeah, because then there's not a lot of people coming in. I mean, I think you can hunt there, which is also odd if it's a nature preserve. But I don't know, it's kind of confusing, but it is pretty secluded, so that it would make sense.
And there's tunnels, so maybe he stayed in the tunnels.
Yeah.
Now, over the next year in Ohio and West Virginia, many report seeing the strange creature with red eyes, body structure of a man, and large wings occurred. This brought many people to the area to see if they could hunt down and find the creature. Paranoia and fear gripped this small West Virginia town. One man claimed to find an egg, claiming it was an egg of the Mothman. Um,
You.
of course, that was found to be a hoax. Sightings did still continue until December 15th, 1967. It was on this day that the Silver Bridge that connects to Ohio collapsed that afternoon, resulting in the deaths of 46 people as their vehicles plummeted into the freezing waters below. Immediately after this, the sightings stopped for several years, leading people to believe that he was there to signal impending doom. Some even believe that the
Oh,
creature was responsible for this tragedy and was in fact harboring death.
I don't think so. I think he was trying to help.
Maybe it was a warning.
I forgot about that. I knew that actually, that detail around the bridge.
Yeah,
But you said he
that
wasn't really seen after that?
sightings picked up years later, and there's still some sightings to this day, but nothing like we were seeing before, where it was like one after the other after the other. Of course, the Mothman to this day still is an icon for that area and has become a major part of pop
Hmm.
culture in movies, books, and of course the local town and lore. Now, there are some theories, of course, of what the Mothman could have been.
Owl.
The main theory is the sandhill crane. Another explanation is the barn owl.
So these owls they're aliens, they're cryptids, the cranes are cryptids.
I just knew when I was researching this, I was like, oh no, not that barn owl again.
No. Well, also remember, a lot of people believe that the Flatwoods monster
Yeah.
was actually Mothman.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that a little bit too. The reasoning for the barn owl, of course, they do have big eyes that do reflect when you shine light into them. But this creature that we're talking about, the Mothman, had red glowing eyes without light sources. Also, the owl would have to be more than abnormally large to match the portions
Yeah, that
stated.
would be a scary. That alone should be a cryptid, just a giant owl.
I mean, they should just make one and name it Owlman at this point.
Yeah.
But also, this theory is said that due to people not being able to identify size expertly when faced with fear, they may have thought the creature was bigger than it actually was. But to me, owl is like, what, 2 feet tall at the biggest?
I don't know. I know they get kind of big, but they're not Mothman big.
They're not 7 feet tall, that's for
No, they're
sure.
nowhere close to that.
Also, the high pitched scream was described to be far more human like than bird like. The encounter that Mr. Scarberry had while driving gives question to what type of bird could even fly hundreds of miles per hour.
Well, that too, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think of that part.
Yeah. Also, eyewitnesses say that what they saw was definitely not a bird and have great issues with this explanation, stating that they know the difference between what they encountered and a bird.
Yeah.
Also, thinking while this may be a plausible explanation, if you're thinking of like one or two witnesses, like, oh, they missaw something, but it really doesn't make sense for the amount of encounters that we do have for the Mothman. We have one after the other there. Another theory is it was all made up to increase popularity and tourism to the town. Since the first sightings began, of course, this has led to an overflux and numbers of people who come to this town. You know, they have a whole attraction set up. So some people theorize this was to gain traction and money for the town.
I feel like that is quite a stretch because the town, they could have known it would have become so big.
Yeah. And also, the reason for this is the first 4 encounters all happened over a course of days and in locations that were miles apart. They were all strangers. So, how are they just gonna? The witnesses didn't know each other.
I do believe a lot of cryptids potentially could be government experiments kind of gone wrong. And that's maybe why they're seen in a certain area for a certain chunk of time,
Mm-hmm.
and then the government kills them off. Kind of like in American Horror Story Asylum. Remember the mad scientist doctor guy had these kind of experimental patients that he worked on, and he like released them into the woods.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of them, like maybe not Mothman because Mothman flies, but I think a lot of those stories could be that.
Maybe he escaped.
Yeah. Or maybe, like, I mean, obviously the government can be doing all sorts of crazy stuff. We have literally no clue what they're doing.
And he was found in an area, his hangout spot was an old TNT like bunker area that the military during World War II was using to hide ammunition.
Yeah, it could be kind of like a Project Montauk sort of thing, and maybe this was supposed to be some sort of war-based creature. Like they were going to use it in war, and then they're like, oh, we can't really control it, and they eventually caught it after the amount of time it took for it to kind of go away after that bridge collapse.
Maybe. And also, maybe Mothman felt at home when he was at the TNT bunkers.
Why?
Because, like, if he was made by the military.
Oh, like that. Yeah.
Aww.
I thought, yeah.
So there is some belief, however, that Mothman is of extraterrestrial origin. Some do believe that during the time that the Mothman was being seen, that there were UFOs being seen within the area. Also, during this time, a salesman said to encounter a UFO. He claims this entity he encountered communicated with him telepathically, asking him what the strange glow in the distance was, which the alien was referring to the town. The person, which is referred to as the grinning man, which is a whole complete different subject, but this is during the exact time period where Mothman was first spotted, so this is why it correlates. This grinning man asked him many questions about the town, and this was less than 2 weeks later that the first sighting of Mothman begins to surface. And like I said, there were UFO sightings, strange lights, and even some residents reported paranormal activity in their homes. That all of this also ceased and stopped after Mothman kind of left the building. There were even men in black said to have been seen during this time in the town.
Okay, I knew about the grinning man. I was wondering, like, I totally forgot the context of it, but I did remember that there was something. I knew the theory of the extraterrestrial stuff with Mothman, and I was wondering if you were going to bring up that like side story, because that is wild.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
is
really
wild.
know the details around it. I don't remember much about it, but I do remember that story.
Yeah, like I said, that whole grinning man is its own topic completely. So,
We'll have to cover him.
yeah, it goes full circle with Mothman, but it's very interesting. I did want to note it because it's kind of strange that you're having these two incidences in 2 weeks time span.
Yeah.
They've gotta correlate. So, not to say that Mothman's the grinning man, but I do feel like
Connection.
there's a connection there. Which
Even if it's just like some kind of, here we go again with portals, maybe some kind of portal situation opened up or some kind of quantum entanglement happened,
yeah,
that our timeline met with another, and they kind of, like
maybe.
Mothman, Grinning Man, and other paranormal things at that time in that town just kind of blended together.
I think so. I love the Mothman. I think I could have done this whole thing as just the Mothman. I really had to cut it short, or else I would have talked about that forever. But that is the legend of the Mothman all wrapped up. Do have one more for you.
Okay.
It's not a long one, it's a short one, but I do find it as a fun one. I like this one, so I wanted to include it. Plus, I don't know if you have heard of this. I'm hoping you haven't. You
Okay.
probably have, but now there is a tale of a mysterious creature that begins in Loveland, Ohio. In the spring of 1955. This is the tale of the Loveland Frogmen.
I love the Loveland Frogman.
Oh, you know this one. I was hoping I could catch you off guard with one.
Well, this is a watery one, so
Yeah.
that's my alley. Like the water-based cryptids. That is where my heart resides.
Now, this one, there's not a whole lot of information. I tried my best to get it, but the frogman was first spotted 20 miles from North Cincinnati in Loveland, Ohio on May 25th, 1955. A businessman who had been going door to door all day. He was eager to get home. He knew he would be getting home very late that night and was traveling alone by the Little Miami River through the desolated roads and marshy areas. Is stopped by something strange. As he was crossing the river, he saw what appeared to be 3 figures talking amongst each other, standing upright at about 3 feet tall. At
Talking
first,
to each other.
having a conversation or something. He's not hearing them, but this is what he witnesses. Because at first he did think they were children, which was very confusing to him because it was around 3 a.m. in the morning. So pretty late at night for some children to be hanging out down by the river. He slowly drives his car up, and at this point he begins to realize these were not people. Instead of hair on their heads, they had large wrinkles, and they had leathered skin with large mouths that gave them the resemblance of frog faces. Their hands glistened in the moonlight, and one of these creatures produces what looked like a wand. Now this wand, The swan produced blue sparks as it was waved over its head,
What?
and they disappeared.
I didn't know they were wizard frog people.
Wizard frog people.
That makes it a little weirder.
Yes.
I
Now,
love.
the businessman said that the only thing left behind was the earthy smell of alfalfa and almonds,
What?
which, of course,
What?
yes. This one's a fun one, which, of course, frightened him, and he returned to his car. Terrified, he fled away. This was the first sighting of the Loveland Frogmen and would create the legacy that would become a local legend. About 4 hours south of Loveland is Evansville. So just a few short months after the salesman experienced his encounter, a woman, Darwin Johnson, and her friend Chris Lamble were out on August 21st, 1955. They were soaking up the sun and enjoying a swim. Darwin claimed that while she was swimming in the nearby water, she was grabbed by a creature with large claws that was violently attempting to drag her underwater.
Ew.
Now, she was able to get loose by kicking herself free and dragging herself towards the shore. But before her and her friend could calm down, she was attacked again from behind and dragged back into the water. Chris then threw out her inner tube for Darwin to catch. This seemed to scare the creature, and Darwin was able to make it back to shore again. She immediately sought medical attention as there were many marks, scratches, and gashes on her leg. After she was bandaged up, there remained something odd. Left was the appearance of a green palm print on her leg. This emerald stain couldn't be removed for several days after the incident. Also, several people came a knocking on her door, including a man who supposedly claimed to be an Air Force colonel. This man took down notes on everything that had happened during the incident. He then left them with a warning to never tell anyone else about what had happened to them.
Oh. You know if that is like, are there official reports of him?
I don't know. But from what I got, that information came from a news reporter that went to visit her, and she told him that this man had come and visited them. She could have been making it up for the news story, or it could have actually happened. Now, this wasn't the only thing that happened on August 21st, 1955, and she was not the only one who had an odd experience that day. A little over an hour away, the Hopkinsville Goblin incident had also occurred, and coincidentally, these are both described as little green men. So yeah, just a little bit down the road, the Hopkinsville Goblin incident occurs. Both little green men. Coincidence? I think not.
Were the goblins in water?
That's a whole story in itself.
I feel like I've heard of that goblin story. I definitely know Loveland frog people. I didn't know they carried magic wands
They
or
do.
huddled together for conversation.
They do.
But of course, why wouldn't they?
Well, as we will see, just a few years before, early UFO investigator had caught wind of the Loveland frog and began investigating the claims. And he paid visits to the police there and found that the incident had also been looked into by the FBI. Hence, that could have been the colonel that came.
Yeah.
And later in 1965, him and two fellow UFO enthusiasts met with a businessman, another businessman, not the first man. According to him, he encountered the Loveland Frogman while driving home late as well at 4 a.m. in 1952. He had caught something in the headlights. Rather than driving away, he got out of his car and approached. What he saw were figures that were 3 feet tall. They were also gray, Now, they had lopsided chest, and these tiny gray,
Lopsided chest?
mm-hmm, like one side was like puffed up big, and the other side was like kind of flat.
Oh,
Also, they had one arm longer than the other.
ew.
He described them as having very ugly faces and a mouth that made them appear like frogs, no eyebrows, but wrinkly heads. These gray beings also held a wand that sparked blue. As he started to approach them, though, they gestured at him to stop. So he didn't move for a few moments. At this point, he kind of backs away, got into his car, went straight to the police. It was also reported that UFOs were seen that night as well.
Oh, so they're maybe not frog people coming out of the river.
Yeah,
They're aliens coming out of the sky.
that's what I think. And then we've got both reports were seen by salesmen. Both reports, there's a wand involved. It seems to line up, and this would have been a few years earlier. So, what are the coincidences?
Oh,
Unless the previous salesman had heard this story. But also, there is no, and this was said in everything that I looked, we don't know the origins or who that first salesman was that started the legend.
oh, I wonder if it was the same one doing it again.
Oh, I know. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, he could have been like, my story's not getting enough traction. So, like, 3 years later, he's like,
Do it
hey.
again. Well, the next known sighting took 15 years to take place. It was March 3rd, 1972. Police officer Ray Sharkey was driving around by the riverside at around 1 a.m. He saw something, an unknown creature that ran past his car. But he sees what he describes as a lizard creature crouching about 10 feet ahead. Now, this ghoulish looking creature, the more he approached it, started to look like a frogman from what he described. It stood up and it proceeded to jump over the guard railing into the water. He then returned later with another officer. They did find some tracks, but nothing really came of that. So he kind of thought at this point that he had seen maybe an iguana, something like that. He's not sure. But the third sighting was
Wait, an
another.
iguana?
Yes, he claims that it may have been just an iguana.
Like a really giant iguana?
Well, you got to think he's a police officer in this area. He's seen this crazy creature, goes to get another police officer to like, hey, I just saw this. I'm sure the other police officer's like, are you all right, man? So I'm thinking that he thought, oh, I sound like crazy right now. Oh, maybe it was an iguana. That's what I'm thinking his mind was going because I'm sure he didn't want his friend to think Sharky's gone a little crazy here.
Where was this again?
This was by the Riverside Drive. So same area.
That's weird. Iguanas don't live in Ohio.
I know, honey. But that's what he thought.
Barnyard animals, cranes, and iguanas.
Yeah, the iguana theory seems to kind of stick with this one too. So the next sighting was another police officer, Mark Matthews. He was traveling along the road and came across a unusual frog-like creature. He thought it could have been a hoax from his friend, since his friend was like, hey, I saw this creature. As he approached the creature did try to run, so he shot at it 3 times, but it got away. Not long after word got out about the sightings, townsfolk believed that these were fake and mocked the account. So instead of being mocked, like we were talking about, the officers said it must have been an iguana that got out. So again, the other officer was like, oh yeah, the iguana story. Let's go with that.
Makes me mad. You know, that
Yeah.
makes you look crazier if you think it's a frog person and then you're like, oh, it must just be an everyday iguana in the middle of the Ohio forest.
Must be. Now, what was even more peculiar is a few years later, Officer Sharkey did approach the city council and asked if the city's mascot could be made into the Loveland frog. But they, of course, laughed this off and it was dismissed. So apparently something stuck with him enough that he was like, maybe this should be our mascot. They should have. I don't know who these people are on this city board. But
Yeah, they could have had a whole little Mothman
yeah,
situation going.
since then, numerous reports have been made, most recently in 2016, when a couple playing Pokemon Go claimed to see the creature. Sam Jacobs, who saw the creature, swears he saw something and even has a video and picture of the sighting. The details in the picture and video are very difficult to make out. Other than glowing eyes, it's really hard to determine what exactly you are looking at in that picture.
Of course.
Yeah, it's always the blurry picture. Now, claims to the creature have been either a mystical being, others state it's extraterrestrial visitors. The descriptions vary, but staying consistent to frog like beings, standing around 4 feet tall, seen along rivers and desolated roads. As the legends grew, so did the skepticism. Some believe that these tales, of course, are made up, and some simply say it's nothing more than iguana that must have gotten loose in the area at the time. But in the realm of cryptozoology, the frogman did stir up quite the buzz with numerous articles. Stories of Loveland frogmen are claimed to date back as early as actually the 1800s.
What?
Yeah, so there are some stories that the natives at this time had another name for it as the Shanahuk, and natives would warn explorers coming over that there was this demonic creature that lived in the water, and the tribes would describe it as dark and bumpy with wrinkled foreheads, slim appearance, with no nose, a frog face, and the appearance of a man that would guard the riverbanks and not allow anyone to get close to the rivers. They describe
Wow.
these beings as being immortal, and if injured, they would just simply sink into the rivers and heal. So,
Okay, that kind of changes my idea just a little bit, knowing the Native Americans had stories about it.
exactly. There's some also kind of cross between this and a species that's been identified as a crosswick monster, which is about 45 minutes from this area. And these stories stirred up in the 1882s in Ohio. And the reports of these creatures look very similar to the frogman.
Oh, probably also them.
Yeah. So again, it's one of these that if you look back into the counters, 1882, and it's a little different because it's in a couple different areas. There's a couple different names for it. I think they all correlate. I think it's all the same frogmen.
I do
But
too.
again, the 1800s all the way to 2016 was the last sighting of the frogmen. But thoughts? I personally think they're aliens.
I don't know. The idea that they kind of remind me of the Greys, but amphibian like maybe they're a crossbreed of the Greys and reptilians.
It's the wands and the disappearing that make me think,
Maybe they're fairies.
but they're kind of big for fairies. They're standing at like 3, 4 feet tall. That's like
Maybe
a
they're just
foot smaller than me if you put it into proportion.
maybe they're like tall fairies.
That's pretty big. That's a pretty big frog. Even for an iguana.
No, iguanas do not get that big.
No. I was gonna say, what is that one really big lizard that's like
Komodo
venomous?
dragon?
Yes. Do they even get that big?
Perhaps, but they're in like not America.
But they're also crawling. They're not standing straight up.
Yeah, they can't. I mean, I think they can get on their back legs to an extent, but they don't withstand themselves on their back legs. Kind of like a cat might get on its
Yeah.
back legs. I might be totally wrong about that. I'm not a
I
Komodo dragonist.
feel I feel like a lot of their height is in their tail as well.
Yes,
Like when we
agreed.
measure it, I don't think they're standing on the tips of their tails.
No, I
But
don't know what I think about this Loveland frog world because it doesn't feel extraterrestrial to me. But some of the accounts, I kind of would go that direction. But then I'm also like, yet again, is this a government experiment gone wrong? But then why do they have wands? And they
wands,
seem like they don't act creature like. the Jersey Devil, the Mothman, Wendigo, they give me more of like a creature kind of demeanor, whereas these seemingly act more like us. Like when the man was talking about walking towards them and they were like, stop, which I can't imagine. I think that's so funny. These gray frog like beings putting their hands out to motion, don't come
Mm-hmm.
any further. And then they whip out a wand and spark blue and vanish.
I know.
I love that.
I
That is
love
so
that they're also circled around like having a little conversation and they're like,
yeah.
who is this?
All they need is a cigar in their webbed hands.
Exactly. I also find it very interesting that every account, even from the Native Americans, describe them with the wrinkly foreheads and the no nose and just pretty much exactly the same account. Other than just you could say, oh, it's a frog.
Yeah.
But the wrinkly heads and just the ugly face, the shimmering hands, it gives it a little bit more credibility, I think, when everybody's kind of got the same details, especially going
Oh,
back
yeah.
as far as the 1800s. But, anyways,
Do you believe in the frog man?
I do believe, honey. You know, I believe in every one of these that we talked about,
Wait,
except
I
the
thought,
Wendigo.
yeah.
Except the Wendigo. Also, though, maybe the Wendigo did happen.
He had his moment.
He had a moment and he died off. Who
Well, you know, a
knows?
lot of people associate the Wendigo with skinwalkers.
Maybe they evolved over time.
Maybe.
I love you. Like, maybe. I did see a whole lot of, when I was researching, it was like, Wendigo versus skinwalkers. What's the difference? And I was like, no, I can't go down that hole right now. I'll never get this finished. So, anyways, that is all I have on North American cryptids.
I loved it. Thank you for delivering cryptids to me. I
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
that. Very good job.
Thank you. I thought it would be fitting for the month.
Yes, and it was refreshing.
Very. This was fun to do. There was a couple of deaths in here, but not crazy. Mostly just the Wendigo. He was the worst.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
But anyways, I guess with all that, we will say good night.
Pleasant nightmares.
Bye.